I was having a conversation with a young man, and, well, not just a young man, but people I work with. I say to them, you don't have to believe in gravity, but if you jump up, you will come down. So you don't have to believe in it. You don't have to believe in any of this stuff. This is the Buddha said, don't believe me, see for yourself. And so when I was in college, people told me, yeah, George, you should meditate, you could do Tai Chi, you could do yoga. And I said, give me a brew and get out of my face, because I don't believe in any of that stuff. But when my butt got on fire, what I call the AOF method of motivation, what is that? AOF, ass on fire. So my ass was on fire. I said, well, maybe I should check that stuff out. Let me see if it'll work. And so for me, and that's the same, I work with a lot of people, they say, oh, I want to be like Mike. Then I said, okay, this is what it takes to be like Mike. And they say, I don't want to be like Mike. I ain't in that much of, there's no sense of urgency. And so just realizing that there's a sense of urgency and realizing that even to the degree that when I was first teaching, I wanted to teach at IMS, CIMC, and Spirit Rock wasn't there yet. And so I could have really got upset that I wasn't able to teach there. But I was lucky enough to know from my practice, and my first teacher, Larry Rosenberg, used to say to me, first he approached me and said, oh, you should teach. And I said, I don't want to teach. He said, that's why you should teach. And so he would give me these little things, and he said, okay, when somebody asks you to teach, you teach. Even if no one shows up, you teach. So when I lived at the Meditation Center in Cambridge for 6 years, we used to get requests from all different places. It could be from, it was 9X at the time, or Ma Bell. It could be some detention center. It could be some company. And I was the one that went out and made house calls. I would go out, and I would work with them. I would teach them this stuff, but I couldn't really teach it to them the way that it was offered in the center, because most of those folks didn't have an hour. And if I didn't offer something that was practical and accessible to them right away, why would they do it? And so I created my own little niche, and I remember having my first interaction with Jack, and Jack told me, and he said, whoa, you've been teaching and you've been doing stuff and on your own. And I said, yeah. I said, I have been. And it's interesting because I was just sharing with Jack this morning. I wrote a book in 2000, and when did it come out? 2015, I think, 4 years ago. And Jack has been getting on me to do a book for 20 years. And at some point he said to me, they're not going to know who Kobe and Michael are if you keep waiting to write a book. So you need to write a book. And so at some point, I did write a book, but I'll tell you a story about it because it's interesting, because in my mind, why should I write a book? There's all these amazing books, especially from Jack, that are already out there. Why should I write a book? Well, it wasn't until I was part of this program. There was the 60 Minutes did a program on mindfulness, and I was one of the 21 participants. And we were on the stage on the day last day or the day before we were to end the retreat, and Anderson Cooper asked us all, what's to stop people from taking mindfulness and exploiting the employees? And no one had an answer. I had an answer, but I said, I can't give them an answer in 5 minutes, so what can I do about that? Well, I need to write a book. So here's the interesting thing about me. I couldn't write the book for me, but I could write the book to be a service to help others. And so I decided at that time, okay, I'm going to write the book. And then the next day after we left Monday morning, and when I went into San Francisco to meet a friend, and she brought the publisher of Parallel Express, because she worked for Parallel Express. And when I had the luncheon, at that lunch, they offered me a book deal. And then we ended up writing a book, I think, less than a year. I had a lot of transcribed notes. As you see, I'm recording this. I record everything. And so that's how things happen. The best way to write a book is not to try to write a book. And so that's my thing. And so when I go into places, like when I went in to work with the Bulls, I had to just meet them where they were and say, okay, how can I be of service? And I did that. And the main thing was, I saw them as whole people. That's the thing that really connected me with Phil. He always, because they had just won 3 championships, he's looking at the whole person. He's not looking at a basketball player. And he said, okay, they have the stress of success, so I want you to come in and help them deal with the stress of success. In the meantime, Michael Jordan retired, and they went full-blown crisis. So I had to talk to them about this idea that you can look at it, and this is what we know. The research says that the elite performers, the people who say yes to life, they look at a crisis as an opportunity. And it's something to challenge ourselves. Okay, it's going to challenge. I'm going to find something out about myself if I relate to it in a certain way. So that's what I encouraged them to do. And then we had a year and a half where we struggled, and then we ended up winning 3 more championships. But it was this idea of being present for life. I call it the 4 A's: accepting awareness. Okay, here's where we are. Michael ain't here. And accepting that. And then what's the compassionate action? To be the best, to see what we can do. Somebody needs to step up. And, we don't, all we need to do is be a little bit better today than we were yesterday, and we keep evolving that way. And so that's what I shared with them, to do that. And of course, when Phil left the Bulls and he went to the Lakers, he asked me to come with him. And so he took a year off, and then the first 3 years with the Lakers, we won 3 more championships. And so I didn't know this until after the fact, when I was writing my experience for, working with clients, that we won 6 NBA championships in 7 years. I said, whoa, that's pretty special. But you know something? I don't remember any of that stuff. I just remember today, the next day. Okay, we win a championship. Okay, we'll celebrate for a couple of weeks. Then we got to get busy. Then we got to get back to it. So being in the moment is really powerful, and that's what we were able to do. Then it took us a while before 2009 and 10 when we won 2 more. But it's the same with every group that I work with. When I went into the prisons, that was interesting. I go in there, and sometimes I would have to sweep the floor and mop it before we could practice. But I went in there, and the correction officers would give me a hard time by making me wait maybe 45 minutes before they let me in. So that means I had to get there early. But then when I started teaching them, because we had a program, I believe in working with the whole system, not just with the players, but the coaches, the whole organization. Same in the prisons, working with the commissioner and everybody on down. And so after a while, they said, oh, George, come on in, and they let me right in. But it's because I was giving them a little love, just attention. That's all they wanted. But for me to see them as whole people, just like I saw the inmates as whole people. So working like right now, and it's interesting, I'm working with a field hockey team. Believe it or not, most of my work has been with female athletes. Work with all kinds of sports. And so 3 years ago, I decided I wanted to work with a female team again. So I started working with this field hockey team. And they are teaching me so much. But the interesting thing is, I've been doing this work with athletes at BC for like 12 years, working with all their teams. And the interesting thing is, when I started working with this team 3 years ago, I decided to go in there and act like I didn't know anything. And just go in with beginner's mind and say, okay, I'm going to see what's here and just be present for what's here. Let it speak to me. And then let the come out of the eye of the hurricane and let what I think we need to do come out of being, so that I was actually living in flow and just flowing into it. And we've had an amazing ride. We hit a bump this year, but it's good because the last meeting I had with them was really interesting. I was saying, okay, we need to do this. And they were saying, no, we want to do this. And I said, okay, so we'll do what you want to do, and we're going to do what I think we should do. And so I'm thinking, oh, I know I ruffled some feathers on that one. then I get a text from the coach saying, oh, they are so happy to be working with you, so happy that you are holding them accountable. Because here's what I'm seeing with this group, and I think it's the same in our basic culture. We avoid conflict. And it's what we call the 5 dysfunctions of a team. The first one is the inability to trust or to be vulnerable. The second one is we avoid conflict. And the third one is because we avoid conflict, we have a lack of commitment. And because we have a lack of commitment, we don't hold each other accountable, and so we end up with a group of individuals instead of a team. And so it all goes back, even though we've been doing things, it's going back to the first step is creating a learning environment where people can be vulnerable and still be heard and be loved. So that's love. That's another way of saying love, because we love what we labor for, and we labor for what we love. And so I'm teaching them how to have self-love, how to have self-care, self-responsibility, self-respect, self-knowledge, or know thyself. And that's what I've been doing, and that's what I'm teaching on one level or another. How can we just be with what is, and then in that space between stimulus and response, because this process creates space, we can choose, and our values have to be, love can be a really good value, because love is also a principle. And the interesting thing about principles is what? They're timeless, they're universal, and they're self-evident. So they don't change. And so when we can commit to love, when we commit to growth, when we commit to being radically inclusive, now we're into something. And so when I go in, I don't go in, on some level I don't belong there, but at another level I do. So I go in and I meet people where they are, and then it's like, how can I love them and continue to love them and teach them to love themselves? And at the same time, they're teaching me how to love myself. So you notice how this works is, when I serve that team, I'm also serving George. And then they're going to go out and they're going to ripple and they're going to share with others. And so I do that in the boardrooms, working with corporations. It's the same thing. It's the same drill. And last year I was working with the Miami Dolphins, and that was an interesting experience, because being in that paramilitary organization and the transactional nature of it was very interesting. And I remember one of the guys said to me, well, which sport do you like the best? And I said, it's not that, it's the person in front of me. That's the most important thing. Whoever I'm working with, that's the most important thing. Especially when they're hungry and they're open. There's no feeling like that when people, I'm not a sadist, but when their ass is on fire and they say, okay, George, help me. And they're ready and they're willing to do whatever I'm asking them to do. That's a good, interesting way of pausing. So here's the thing, and that's what I would teach. As a matter of fact, that when you're teaching, I don't know if you notice it, or when you're doing things, stuff happens. And it's like, can we react or respond to it? And so for me, when something like that happens, it's a reason, it's an opportunity to just pause. So thank you for waking me up. Thank you for getting me some space. And so that's the power. It's like, so I need to be, if I want love, I have to be loving. If I want kindness, I have to be kind. It's really simple. I was working with this young client of mine, and I said to him, okay, so if you want respect, you got to be respectful. And you know what he said to me? I learned that in kindergarten. But he forgot. So how many of us have forgot what we learned in kindergarten? As a matter of fact, there's a book out that said all I need to learn, I learned in kindergarten. And that's true. We learn this stuff. We know this stuff, but we can forget it because we get focused on out there or letting the world or somebody tell us who we are instead of us deciding who we are being. And that's the challenge. I feel like the challenge is to be myself, but also to be for myself. And so there's a philosopher out there, he talks about, I got my mind on money, money on my mind. That's meditation, that's Dr. Dre. But he says something even more powerful than that. You know what that is? I got my money on me. Do we have our money on us? That's love. Now, I've been taught that that's selfish. No. I feel like we have to be selfish to be selfless. And so when I can take care of me and I can do me, then I can share what I have. And so this practice is not just something we just sit and, we're quiet. That's cool. We need that. But this practice, in my opinion, is from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed, we can be clear about, what's my mind doing? How am I seeing things? Is there love present or not? Am I being loving, or if I'm not being loving? Am I being kind? Am I not being kind? And it's interesting because I'm not even really talking about the conversation we're having with other people. I'm really talking about the inner dialogue and a roommate. And there's always something going on. And I will guarantee you, if you're anything like me and you're a human being, you're having conversations with people who are not even here. And those conversations are not pleasant. And then when you get there, you get what you practiced. Because a lot of what I do is learning, practicing, performing, or experience. That's our experience. So when I have an experience that didn't work out well, it's just telling me what I need to learn and practice. And so if I want to have a good conversation with a friend of mine that I'm having a challenging time with, why not have conversations of love and compassion and being able to listen to each other, rather than me saying, well, you don't understand and you don't respect me and you don't this, you don't that, whatever the conversation is, that we start to understand. Maybe the first law is the self-love of self-care, self-responsibility, self-respect, self-knowledge. And so I don't know if I want to talk much more than that. I think I'd like to open it up for Q&A. But here's the interesting thing, and I love that you folks came up with this title of this loving awareness mindfully, looking at things with love, with kindness, kind eyes, with an open heart, the hope in mind. That starts everything, because it's right view. When the mind is right, everything else is right. So if I'm starting off with love, we know this. It's called the Broadening build theory, that when we're in a wholesome state of mind, that our ability to see things and expand and not be stuck on tunnel vision. Another way I like to say it is I talk about the idea that we're either in survival mode or growth mode. Of course, this is the autonomic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, rest and digest, or the relaxation response. I like the rest and digest because you notice it, that when you're sitting and you're meditating and your stomach is making all those kind of noises, you don't have to get mad at yourself or your neighbor because they're making this, all of that. That's just the body working more properly. That's the rest and digest. And so you see that how we see things determines our experience. And research says this, 90% of our long-term happiness is based on how we interpret our experience. Not 10%, 90%. So that says that what we're doing, is really powerful, and we can do it all day long. We don't have to wait till we get to the meditation center to be kind or be loving. We could do it all the time so that it becomes a habit of mine. That we're more willing to be open and listen to somebody, especially when they've been telling us the same thing 2,000 times. Because I guarantee you, if I get enlightened, it's probably going to be driving my car. Because in Boston, you know what I mean? But out here, you all ain't too bad either. You all pretty bad out here, too. I keep thinking it's just Boston, but no. And it's not Boston or New York or California. You know what it is? It's a mindset. Are they in growth mode or survival mode? So when you're in growth mode, you have that building and broaden building. You can see more things. If you're in survival mode, you're stuck on tunnel vision, and the heart can't open. And so just that simple thing, am I in growth mode or survival mode? And this is what they say, This guy wrote a book called The Biology of Belief. He said that on a cellular level, the cell is either in growth mode or survival mode. It can't be in both. So that goes and tell you that how science is catching up with the practice. We know if you get the right view, everything else is going to be fine. So what do I mean by right view? I mean a mind that is the opposite of greed. That could be compassion, generosity. The mind is the opposite of ill will, goodwill, compassion. And a mind that's opposite of delusion, which is wisdom, or seeing clearly. So we can do that from moment to moment. So that's what I practice when I go into these different domains and work with different people, and that's why I'm able to. Why? Because it's the same joke. Can I be present, and can I be loving, and can I be honest and be real at the same time, going in there to be a service, not to serve myself. So I think I'll end it there. I think I got about 12 minutes for questions. Thank you. Y'all ain't gonna leave me hanging like that, are you? Come on now, you all got something. Okay, there's a hand over here. So she gets the first assist. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I have a question. The people that you work with when you work with the teams or in any other venue situation, do you find that they they develop a meditation mindfulness practice in their lives outside of what you do with them as a team? Do they take this out in their lives as well?
Some do, some don't. And it's interesting because I look at it this way. So does everyone hear the question? Do they practice this or not? I learned a long time ago, that's none of my business. I'm Johnny Appleseed. I'm walking around and I'm just planting seeds. Wherever they take root, they take root. And if they don't, they don't. But my job is just to plant the seeds. And if they can get it, they can get it. Because my experience is when I go in and I say, okay, I'm going to fix you, and my self-worth is tied up with you meditating, that's not a good place to be. It's like the coaches when they want it more than the players. We got a name for that. We call that burnout. So it's not about that. It's offering them, but also seeing what works and what doesn't. So that's why I think one thing that I think I could do better or might be more helpful is to actually sit with people. I mean, Jack's been teaching this for years. Sit with them and or really talk to them about how they're applying the practice so we can do some correction. Because I believe in this tradition, we are so adverse to ambition that we're not really comfortable evaluating how our practice is going and evaluating. And it's interesting because one of the things I learned that Larry Rosenberg told me, he said that I could tell when my practice is getting better because the 5 spiritual powers will be growing. Faith, mindfulness, right effort, right concentration, and wisdom. That those qualities would grow. And of course, the other thing is, it's interesting because even when I worked at the Center for Mindfulness and we did the 8-week stress reduction clinic, I talked to somebody and they said, well, nothing's really changed. I talked to their wife. Oh, yeah, they're way different. So on some level, what do we mean by whether or not what we're doing is having an impact? Because sometimes, like for me, the seed could have been planted for this years ago, maybe even lifetimes ago, and it just that under the right conditions, things manifest. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes. You have a hand right here.
Yes, I'd like to know how you handled acute pain with mindfulness.
How did I handle acute pain, mindfulness?
Or did you?
Oh, I do, and I still do. Yes, how did I? Well, it's interesting because the Buddha used to talk about if you know how people use darts, he talked about the two darts. If somebody throws if you get hit with a dart, there's that pain, but then there's the mental anguish and your relationship to it that causes a second dart, right? And so when I had chronic pain, migraine headaches mostly, it was usually a sign that I was trying too hard or doing too much. And so I got to the point where, because once it got into manifestation, I don't care what medication they gave me, it didn't help. But if I could see it arising, then I could nip it in the bud. So for me, growing up in the inner city, I was too cool to be stressed. So I said, man, I'm chilling, everything's all right. And my body would be saying, I don't know about you, dude, but your shoulders up around your ears, there's some stress in here. So once again, that acceptance or awareness of, yes, there's suffering going on. And so just to see that and then to understand the difference between what we call bare attention or bare awareness of just noticing the sensations and just being with the sensations instead of the story about it. And I did some research when I had to get a lot of dental work done because when my recovery, I was neglecting that. And I remember going into the dentist's office and I was thinking about it, and the drill sound went on, and he hadn't even touched my tooth, and I was recoiling. And then I said, okay, relax, just open up a little bit more. And what I noticed was it was just pressure. And it was my memory of the pain that was causing the pain that I was experiencing rather than the bare sensations that I was experiencing. Now, I will say this. I've had a dry socket and I've had surgeries and everything. I take the pain medication. Okay, you take the pain medication and then, I take it, it didn't wean off it because actually 3 years ago I was supposed to teach at Spirit Rock and I had kidney stones. And it was interesting. I'll share this experience with you. So I had kidney stones. I was in a lot of pain, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to, the car came to pick me up. I knew I wasn't going to be able to go, and I would have to go to the hospital. So I forced myself to take a shower. Because I was taught that when you go to a hospital, you got to be clean, no holes in your underwear, no holes in your socks. And then when I went and they were helping me. I had 2 women tell me that day that kidney stones are more painful than childbirth. And I said, I have to take your word for it because I can't experience that. But that's what it was. But at the same time, it was my mind was able to observe things and not be so reactive. So I had the first dart, but not the second one. Or just, I could see that I was actually participating in that. Does that make sense? And so but we got to get out of these constructions about what should be rather than seeing what works for you because we all have different thresholds of pain. And so there's sometimes that people said I should have pain and I didn't. And there's other times I had pain and people said I shouldn't. I ain't listening to them. I'm listening to my body because my body doesn't lie. Yeah. Okay, wherever, yeah.
Way over there on the other side.
Okay.
We got 2 mics.
Hi, George.
She's over there.
Hey, thanks for the talk. I had a Lakers question.
Okay.
The 2001 Lakers were the year they went 15-1 in the
Yep.
postseason. They won the first 3 rounds. They lost the first game of the finals against the 76ers, and then they won 4 straight against the 76ers. I was wondering if you had any stories about what it was like coming out of the 1 loss to go into the last 4 victories, or just any other Lakers stories you had. Thanks.
So I was going to say, it happens, stuff happens. But we had like 10 days off in between, and what happens is you lose your, even though you practice, there's no substitute for playing. And they were making shots, we weren't, and it happens. You can't win every game. And so for me, when I work with teams, I can't get lost in whether they win or lose. My job is to keep them in the moment and then talking about how we learn from that and to build on that. And I was, it happened with Chicago. I think they lost 1 game and then they came back and won everything. So it's always the next game. Whether you win or lose, it's the same drill. You got to begin again. And so for me, working with the Lakers is very interesting. I'll share one story I thought was interesting because I had been to championship celebrations in Chicago. And when I did the championship celebration in LA, I was on the bus and I could feel this angst, this energy in the city. And I was puzzled by that because it was like relief. Oh, thank you, we won. It was just very different. And it's interesting. So it was kind of, working with the Lakers was kind of surreal. So when we won the first championship, we celebrated at the Playboy Club. And then it was really interesting, my experience, but I got to talk to Dustin Hoffman, and he's the one that shared with me that there's no spiritual center in LA, so to speak. And so the team and identification with the team meant a lot for people. It was a way for them to feel connected. So winning a championship. So you can see how sports sometimes can help us get connected with something bigger than ourselves, but also because we're going beyond what normal limits are. There's something that speaks to our spirit when we see people go beyond the norm, right? And so I think, so with that, in my experience, it was just different. But it was, I've been fortunate. I was there, and I got to work with different people, but just watching us. And then there was one, Phil talks about it, I think he talks about it in my book, when we played Sacramento Kings, and we were playing them a seventh game in Sacramento. And what happens is, day of a game, we come together, we watch film, and if it's a Sunday game, we eat together, and I usually do a little meditation with them or talk to them. And so this particular time, everybody was in their seat like 5 minutes before they were supposed to, ready to go. And so it took an overtime to win that game, and Shaq made all his free throws coming down the stretch. So it's just powerful, but that's the buildup. We have been doing this for years, but to see the guys just really being locked in, there's no way we win that game if we're not locked in and we're not making plays and being able to keep moving on, even though don't worry about the score, just make the next play. Make sense? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being here,
Okay.
George.
This is the last one.
So my question is about the nature of sports. You seem to have worked with teams where there's an opponent, and to some degree...
There's a what? I didn't hear that.
There's an opponent.
Opponent, right.
And to some degree, your success always comes at the expense of your opponent. So how do you hold the opponent, the other, in your heart? Or how do you teach your clients, your students, how to hold the opponent in the heart? And what can that teach us about our moment in history right now where we are just so divided?
Yes. So I get this question a lot. It's about, isn't mindfulness antithetical to competition? And here's the thing, you're not competing against the other team, you're competing against your previous best self. And just like you, that person wants to win, so you can relate to them and you don't have to hate on them or whatever, because I notice most of the guys I work with, when the opponent falls down, they help them up. Some other guys, they step over them, right? And so what it's telling us is that we have to focus on who we're being and be true to who we are. And we're not competing against somebody out there. And it's not that we're taking anything away from them because they have the same opportunity we do. So they didn't get it done. They ain't got nothing to do with us. You understand what I'm saying? And so on some level, as a country, we need to start off with the facts and then work from there and then look at it like, okay, forget about the personality, just look at the principles involved and what are the consequences. If we talk about in here, cause and effect. So if we do this and you get everything you want, what's the consequence? And is that going to bring us closer together or further apart? And I will say that a lot of the decisions that are being made is more about being divisive on purpose, because if you don't divide people, there's no way you can win with 67% or 47%. Okay? So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.